"Oh, a cat!" cried the little girl at once, as soon as she saw the kitten in Gareth's arms. She was about 6 years old and rushed forwards to say hello. "Isn't she lovely, Daddy?" She clearly wanted to play with Felix, so Gareth bent down so that the little girl could pet her. Felix blinked up at her with her beautiful emerald eyes and calmly let the child stroke her fluffy black fur. The boy, who was younger, about 4 years old, was a bit shyer than his sister, but he too edged forward and extended a hesitant hand towards the adorable-looking cat. "As I was saying, sir," Gareth continued from his position crouched on the ground with the cat and the kids, "I'm so terribly sorry about the cancellation. The next train to the airport is in 20 minutes. If you get that, you will still make your flight." The man looked rather as though the wind had been taken out of his sails. He glanced at his wife, and both of them stared down at their children, who were purring over Felix as though they themselves were kittens. "She's so soft, Daddy," the girl exclaimed. "In 20 minutes, did you say?" the man asked more calmly. 20 minutes, yes, sir," confirmed Gareth. "It will be on platform 1. Felix had completely taken the edge off the confrontation. As the family thanked him for his help and the children reluctantly waved goodbye to Felix, Gareth stood up and carried his trusty colleague back into the office. As the door closed behind them, he looked down at her and gave her the most enormous grin. "Good work, station cat," he told her proudly. "Very good work indeed." Chapter 12, A Very Special Cat. Felix continued to work her magic again and again as a key member of the customer-facing team of Huddersfield Station. She was absolutely superb at calming the angriest customer. As Angela Hunt observed, as soon as they saw Felix, the rage just totally disappeared. In all her years at the station, she had never seen anything like it. And it seemed to work on everyone, from elderly customers to middle-aged mums. Gareth had a teenage customer once, a young woman with short, bleached blonde hair, who was ranting and raving that her life was over because of the cancelled service that had wrecked everything. Felix had been asleep under the window at the time, and as the woman screamed at him in a total teenage tantrum, Gareth had fumbled discreetly under the desk for his cat, picked Felix up and put her on display in the window, as though producing a rabbit from a hat. It changed the conversation completely and abruptly. "What on earth?" the young woman had said. Gareth had then slipped out of the door with Felix, and the girl had held her and stroked her, and she just forgot that the train had been cancelled and her life had been ruined 5 minutes before. Felix wasn't only skilled at diverting angry customers, however. She could also cheer up the unhappiest folk. Because the office window opened onto platform 1, the announcers could hear everything that went on out there. One day, Gareth's eardrums were split by the most wretched sound of a screaming child. A little girl with Goldilocks curls was crying her heart out, and she was standing right outside the office howling. He could hear that her mum was trying to comfort her and had been trying to comfort her for the past 5 minutes, with no luck whatsoever. The child was distraught. Gareth went out onto the platform with Felix in his hands. He didn't really know much about children, so he had no idea if this would work. But the mum was really struggling. The girl, who was maybe 2 or 3 years old, was red in the face. Her tears had made watery tracks all down her cheeks. As she took a deep breath in preparation for yet another ear-splitting wail, Gareth interjected hurriedly. "Look," he said to her brightly, "I've got a cat. Would you like to see her?" The little girl blinked up at him in surprise, and the scream stored in her lungs never came. "Come and see our little cat," he said encouragingly, exchanging a look with her relieved mum. The two walked over to Gareth, who bent down so that the child could see Felix properly. "Here she is," he said. "This is Felix." He put the station cat down on the platform, and Felix trotted cautiously over to the little girl and sat down at her feet, looking up at her. The child stared back in wonder, whatever terrors had been plaguing her, forgotten. "Say hello, Felix," urged her mum. "Hello, Elix," echoed the little girl, her voice transformed from hiccoughing howl to burbling brook. Felix stood up again and wound her way through the legs of the girl and those of her very happy mother, pressing her furry body against them both. It was another job well done. Felix was doing such brilliant work at the station that it was around this time that she made her first appearance in the media in November 2011. At only 6 months old, an article was written about her arrival at the station in the Huddersfield Examiner, celebrating the employment of this very special member of the team. Angie was interviewed for it and made an appeal to customers not to feed Felix, for while the Moggy had now successfully lost the weight she'd gained after her operation, they didn't want to get him fat again. Angie explained that Felix was going to be a working Moggy, the pest controller. "She's about to start work on keeping pests to a minimum," promised the Examiner. Despite the media coverage in the local paper, many customers travelling through Huddersfield who came from far and wide were still astonished to meet the railway cat, whether they encountered her at the customer information point, patrolling the platforms, or doing a security check with one of her colleagues. If they met Felix when she was on her own, they would often rush up to the nearest member of staff shortly afterwards. "Do you know there's a cat on the station?" they'd exclaim, or they'd pick her up and proffer her. "We found a cat." "Yeah, we know," the team would say casually, maybe even a little wearily after it had happened several times. "She's ours." "But where does she live?" they would ask in consternation. "She lives here." "Oh, is she a stray?" Felix, at this juncture, would look up at them haughtily and give almost a toss of her ebony head so that the diamante studs on her collar would glimmer and her pink heart tag would tinkle indignantly. The station's team's response would be just as proud. "She is not a stray. She's legal, she's above board, and she's very much loved." Felix would then start washing herself, licking that oh so fluffy black fur to keep it nice and clean. A stray? Honestly, did she look like a stray, with her well-kept coat and her glittering accessories? She seemed almost offended by the slur. But despite the eye-catching glamour of those glitzy accoutrements, not everyone seemed to notice them. There were a few occasions in those early days where a well-meaning customer had picked up the cat and tried to take her home, perhaps because they thought she was a stray, or perhaps because she was so very beautiful. Luckily, the team on the concourse always spotted the situation arising before any damage was done. The collar was pointed out and the address read, and Felix, rather than being catnapped, would be safely returned to platform 1. But the team couldn't always keep tabs on her. It was a busy station and a big one, and they all had jobs to do. Felix was an independent woman. At any time of day or night, she might be off exploring round the bushes at the southern end of platform 1, near the King's Head pub, or up at the other end watching those tasty little wild rabbits. She was becoming more and more fearless. Though her hatred of the black crows still saw her running for cover. Sometimes she tried to style it out on the platform, looking at one of them and striking an "I own this joint" pose. But the moment the crows started walking or flying towards her, she would leg it back home if possible, or up to safety on a windowsill. But then she'd be stuck there, marooned, and the crow would know it. It would caw at her, a cackling kind of call that sounded like a mocking laugh. Angela Dunn, working in the Lost Property Office, came to recognise that sound, Soon she knew that if the crows started making that noise, Felix would be stuck on a windowsill outside somewhere, too terrified to move. Angela would have to come out onto the platform and shoo the crows off so that Felix could get down from her little island and run home to safety. So, although the kitten was making great leaps forwards, she was still a vulnerable creature at heart, new to the world, and still finding her way, working out what was a terror and what was a toy, who was a friend and who was an enemy. As with all parents watching their children grow, the station team were both delighted and chilled by her growing independence. But Felix was a loyal little thing, almost as if she knew they might be fretting. Her explorations never lasted for any length of time, and she never wandered far from platform 1. Every few hours, several times a shift, the team would spot her hanging out by the bike racks or leaping up onto the customer service desk to put in her time on the front line. She gave them no cause for concern. But then came a day Angie would never forget. The day when she signed on for her shift and Billy had to take her to one side. "Now, I don't want you to panic, Ange," the gruff team leader began. These words, of course, were destined to set her heart hammering hard and fast within her chest. "I don't want you to panic," he went on, "but we can't find Felix." Angie looked at him blankly. So Billy said it again, more plainly, more worryingly, and in words that left no room for doubt. "Felix has gone." Chapter 13, Missing. "What do you mean, you can't find Felix?" Angie asked. Billy ushered her into the team leader's office and sat her down in a chair. "She's disappeared," he said gently. "She's been gone all day. Nobody's seen her." "What do you mean?" Angie said again, the panic rising in her voice. "She can't have just gone. She must be somewhere." But as Billy told her the whole story, Angie realised with a sinking feeling that the kitten was well and truly lost. It had been Dave Rooney who'd first raised the alarm. He'd been the team leader on duty on the early morning shift, and he'd suddenly realised mid-morning that he hadn't seen Felix since he'd clocked on. That was highly unusual. "Have you seen Felix?" he casually asked the team, strolling through the station. But they all said no. Dave wasn't too worried. He sauntered down to the bike racks, checked in the shower room in case she was sleeping on her fleecy black blanket, and ducked his head into the lost property office, asking Angela Dunn if Felix had popped by that morning. But the little kitten was nowhere to be found. Dave walked back up platform 1, racking his brains. Felix sometimes liked to hang around the King's Head at the southern end of the station, the boozy little thing, attracted by the thick bramble bushes at the very edge of the station's plot. Could she have gone into the bushes and got stuck, unable to fight her way out? He hurried down there, but he could neither see nor hear the kitten amid the dense knotted briars. It was time to call in reinforcements. He radioed Dave Chin, the TPE maintenance man, and asked him to pop by as soon as he could. Dave Chin wasn't based permanently at Huddersfield, but worked all over the railway network, doing whatever odds and sods needed doing, turning up whenever he was summoned, like a sort of railway fairy godfather. He worked at Dewsbury, Stalybridge, Leeds and Manchester as well, but was often at Huddersfield. The first time he'd met Felix, she was sitting in a watering can on platform 1 with her head poking out of the top, and it had been a mutual case of love at first sight. From that moment on, whenever Dave Chin came to Huddersfield, he made it his first duty to visit Felix, and it turned out that he was the ultimate Felix charmer. Though she was an affectionate cat with many people, her relationship with Dave was something else. He would pick her up, and she would roll over instantly onto her back and loll there in his arms, her head hanging off one side and her legs dangling down the other, so that he could rub her belly or tickle her front paws. He'd walk all around the station with her like that, Felix splayed out in his arms, so loved up and easy, and she didn't care who saw it. Felix, and Angie Hunt used to tap when she saw her shaking her head in mock shame, "You're an absolute disgrace." So when Dave Rooney told Dave Chin that Felix was missing, the maintenance man wanted to do everything in his power to find her. The team leader relayed his concern that the kitten might have got trapped in the overgrown bushes, and Dave Chin clapped his hands together decisively and sprang into action. "Right," he said firmly, "let's get that cleared." Dave was a down-to-earth, well-muscled man with a weathered face and copious blonde hair. He put every one of those muscles to use that day as he cautiously chopped down all the overgrown bushes on the station, looking under every briar for a little black and white cat. But when he had finished, there was still no sign of her. The clock ticked on and Dave Rooney completed his shift. As he handed over to Billy in the afternoon, he gave him an update, and on top of the agenda was that Felix was missing. The old-timer had shaken his head incredulously at all this fuss over the kitten. He was sure that the cat would turn up. Yet as the hours passed by and Billy did his own searches of the station and completed his own security checks, he realised he had been wrong, for there was not a hint of a whisker to be seen. The sun set and the cold night settled like a blanket on the station. Billy, despite himself, began to worry. He often moaned about the cat, as did everything else, calling her a flea bag or a waste of space, or simply, "Ugh, that cat." But despite his mean-sounding words, there was always a warmth to his tone. He really hoped she was all right. The station clock kept time as accurately as always, and all too soon the digits turned to 8 p.m, and Angie arrived for her night shift. Billy knew she would be worried sick at the news he had to share, which is why he had tried to break it to her gently by saying, "Now, I don't want you to panic, Ange." Sitting in the team leader's office, having now heard the full account of the drama from Billy, Angie was panicking. "Have you searched?" she grilled Billy, leaping to her feet and pacing the office. "I mean, properly." "I've searched, Ange," she told her. "But have you checked underneath that disused carriage on platform 2? Because she likes it under there. She sometimes goes and hides there." "I know, Ange," Billy said. "Everybody on the station knew the kitten's favourite places better than the backs of their own hands. I've searched. And the bicycle racks? I've searched. And the shower? Angie, I've looked everywhere. She's not here. She's gone." A big lump suddenly appeared from nowhere in Angie's throat and hot tears pricked her eyes. Ange, she'd turn up. She'd get hungry. She'd come back. It's what cats do. "But she's never been gone this long," Angie said in a wobbly voice, sinking into a chair for support. "Her poor little kitten." She was glad at least that it was Billy who had told her. They went back a long way, and if anybody was going to see her upset, she wanted it to be him. As a team leader, you couldn't show your emotions out on the station floor. Her job was to lead, to sort out problems, to get things done, and crying didn't come into that. But Billy had always understood her. Angie's pet niggle about herself was that she couldn't always find the right words to say what she meant. But if she and Billy were in the same meeting together, and she was floundering about trying to express herself and failing, Billy used to clear his throat and say, "I think what Angie means is," and he would get it absolutely right. "Yes, that's it," Angie would say, and he'd nod at her in his gruff way, not wanting her thanks, but knowing she was grateful anyway. Billy stood up, ready to head home. He placed a rough, weathered hand firmly on her shoulder as he went. "I'm sure she'd turn up," he said. After he left, Angie sat in the office alone. She felt absolutely devastated. She didn't want to do any work. She couldn't do any work. She couldn't think of anything but Felix out there somewhere in the dark winter's night. Who knew what had happened? Had someone taken her? Had she decided that she'd had enough of her working life on the station and called it quits? Had, God forbid, she roamed onto the tracks and been hit by an express? Billy had told her that Dave Chin, who was PTS, personal track safety, certified and wore the all-over orange high-vis uniform of those who could walk on the tracks, had looked all over the railway lines for her, and there'd been no sign. But even so, what if she'd wandered into one of the tunnels? Angie felt sick. Felix wasn't even a year old. She was absolutely frantic about her. Every minute felt like an hour. So when the team leader's mobile phone rang 10 hours into her shift at 8:10 p.m, Angie's nerves were already shot to pieces. Huddersfield Station? She answered tearfully. Oh, Huddersfield Station, said a male voice on the other end of the phone, as though something now made perfect sense. I work for Domino's Pizza. Domino's Pizza, thought Angie. We haven't ordered any pizza. But then he said, I think we've got something that belongs to you. Suddenly, the broken pieces of her world fell neatly back into place. Angie gasped. Is she black and white? She asked joyously. Yes, the man replied with a laugh. Well, that was it. Angie dropped everything. The station was secondary and her colleagues would take up the slack. She literally ran to the car park and threw herself into her car. Domino's Pizza, she was thinking. Well, I never. And also, how the hell did you get there, little kitten? For Domino's Pizza was quite some distance away, located right by the busy ring road that encircled Huddersfield's town centre. It was totally out of the area that Felix was known to have frequented on her own, which essentially comprised the length of platform 1 and 2. If she hadn't crossed the main tracks, which seemed unlikely since she never had before, and still ran for home if an incoming train was near, then to reach the pizza place, she would have had to contend with the traffic in town and cross several busy roads. Unless, of course, someone had taken her. At that moment, Angie didn't care how she'd got there. She was just pleased that she knew exactly where she was. She squealed to a stop outside Domino's Pizza and ran in as fast as she could. And there, sat on the floor in the corner, munching away on something the pizza man had given her and relishing the delicious scent of the cooking pizzas, was Felix. She blinked up at Angie as she ran in, then got rapidly to her feet as though she'd been waiting for her ride. Angie felt her heart flip right up into her mouth and back again. Oh, you've got her, she breathed in relief to the man behind the counter. You've got her. She couldn't get to Felix quick enough. She scooped her up from the ground and hugged her. Felix looked happily at her, her fluffy tail swishing, seemingly delighted to be reunited with her mum. Angie stared right into her beautiful green eyes. She was so happy to see her. How did she get here? She asked the man behind the counter. No idea, he laughed. She just wandered in. Angie turned her attention back to her beloved cat. You're not going anywhere ever again, she told her sternly. What do you think you're up to, and where have you been? Her worry made her voice quite sharp. She knew Felix couldn't answer, but the questions spilled out regardless. Angie held the kitten up in the stark fluorescent lighting of the pizza joint and checked her over carefully, as if looking for clues. There was at least no sign of any injury, but neither was there any evidence as to where Felix might have spent her whole day away from home. Angie brought her back down into her arms. It is good to have you back, madam, she told her affectionately. She's a grand cat, the pizza man commented from the counter, adding with a grin. Can we keep her? Angie scowled at him jokingly. You've absolutely no chance, she declared emphatically. No chance. Do you know how many people have been out looking for this cat today? She's lovely, he observed with a smile. We know, Angie cried, holding her kitten even closer to her chest. We know she is. She thanked the man for phoning her. Thank God for Christine and that heart-shaped tag, she thought, and carried Felix out to the car. Right, you, Angie told the cat. Adventure's over. We're going home. Back at the office, Angie put some food in her bowl, and Felix wolfed it down at once. While the kitten ate, Angie picked up her phone again and dialed Billy. It was the least she could do after his kindness earlier. She knew that despite himself, he would be worried too. He answered after only a few rings. I've got her, Angie said breathlessly as soon as he picked up. He didn't need to ask her who. Where's she been? He asked curiously. Domino's Pizza, deadpanned Angie. Only Felix could go AWOL and end up at a food place. And that's where I'm going to leave it.